packet, you have the minutes of the September 17th board meeting. Are there any corrections to those minutes?
Move the minutes as presented.
Support. Any further discussion on the minutes? Those in favor of the minutes of the September 17th minutes, or September 17th board meeting, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I have a few remarks tonight, probably a little different than what I would normally remark on, but many of you may have received a little postcard this a week ago, and I wanted to clarify a couple things on it. One thing stated on it is that we have high taxes. It's true, we have high taxes. And the reason for that is the voters have voted to approve those taxes. Most of your tax money goes to the schools, some of it goes to the county, and we eventually trickle down to the township. And that includes our PDR funding, our public safety funding, and our operating budget. We'll be talking a little bit more about funding the operating portion of it later tonight. Some things that were in that postcard that were disturbing. The first one was, I don't know if Webster Township has ever had a road fund. We're going to establish one after the vote of the people to tax themselves to better improve our roads. I can say for the last 30 years, we have never had a road fund. We have had a line item in the budget, in the general fund, and just this last year, we put a line item in our CIP fund and transferred money more than what our the property tax revenue was to that line item in the CIP fund. In the future, we won't have to do that, hopefully, because we do have a millage that will support this road fund. But that was a false statement. In terms of the August voter turnout, was never ever discussed by this board in terms of low voter turnout or anything to put the millage on the ballot. The reason for the millage being on the ballot was we were concerned that the county propositions in November would probably overshadow it. Home-based business. You've heard some complaints about the home-based business. It's been in effect for nearly nearly two decades, and nobody's ever complained about it until about a year ago. It's nothing new. We were talking about making some changes to it, and we still may do that in the future. But it'll be done here during a public meeting. It will not be done any place in private. You can have chickens in Webster Township. The card indicated that you couldn't. You just have to have 5 acres or greater. And next month we'll probably be discussing an animal ordinance that may change some of that, but as of today, it takes 5 acres to have any type of farm animals. Selective enforcement. I don't know what selective enforcement means, so that's a hard one for me to discuss. How we do enforce the ordinance is we respond to complaints. We don't go out looking for problems. Problems seem to find us. Again, I don't know what selective enforcement is. If you consider that to be selective enforcement, that's how we do it. If you wish for us to do it differently, we're probably going to be discussing that in a future meeting, again, at this table, not in private. Those are my remarks for the evening. You have an agenda in front of you. Are there any changes we need to make to that agenda?
John,
Yes.
I would like to move the ethics policy policy complaint 2, which is E, take it off and put it on correspondence. That's where I believe it should be. We need to look into the procedure for dealing with any of those, and I don't think bringing it here and having this as a venue right now is the proper way to do it.
Is the board in agreement with that? Okay. Delete E and move all-star alarm proposal up to E.
I would like to propose some amendments as well.
Okay.
Under old business, I would like to suggest that we switch the order of D and E. Talk about the punch list before we talk about the payments.
Okay.
And I would like to add a new business item. I'd like to have a discussion about the phone system.
New F is phone system.
Yes, please.
Any other changes? Is there any kind of motion?
I'll move the agenda as amended.
I'll support.
Okay. Further discussion? Seeing none, those wishing to approve the agenda as amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Approved. Public hearing. It was introduced to us, I don't know, maybe 3 months ago or so, about a private road at 3676 North Territorial Road. We have an application for a variance on that. Sri, would you give us the Cliff's Notes version of the what is happening here?
We've been talking about it in and out in general in the context of private road amendment as well. The resident, the lot in question is considered a non-conforming lot because the private shared driveway that serves those lots on that road exceed 3, which is the maximum allowed driveways off of a shared private driveway. So the permit application was in process, and the applicant was advised to get a road permit to bring the lot into conformance before a compliance permit for constructing a single-family home is reviewed. Which is why the application is in front of you here. The reason why the public hearing is scheduled is because the applicant is seeking 2 variances. The minimum required road width for private roads is 18 feet. The applicant is requesting to reduce it to 16 feet, which is the current maintained width of the road. And the ordinance requires a cul-de-sac at the end of private road. The applicant is requesting to allow a hammerhead in lieu of a cul-de-sac.
Okay, Mr. Fritz, would you like to comment?
I, at this point, don't have any comment.
Okay.
So the public hearing is for 2 requests. The applicant also was requesting a waiver of fees, which is not part of the public hearing, but is a separate item. The submittal was presented before you at the last board meeting. It is pretty much the same. The only few updates is that there is a letter from the applicant regarding variances, and the access easement information has been verified and updated. The proposed hammerhead is not part of the current recorded access easement, but the applicant is proposing to modify the easement to include the hammerhead. With that, if you have any questions, I'm available to answer.
say, I drove down there, and I know we're talking about a reduction of a minimum width from 18 to 16, but it's probably every bit of 18. It's just that there's grass growing over the gravel, which happens over time. So even if we say down to 16, there's still 18 feet of base and stuff there. I mean, I've got the same issue on our private road. Every private road does, it's been there for some time. So just because we're not seeing gravel necessarily, doesn't mean that it's not wide enough. I think it is. And the height was an issue. We looked at the height before. I think the height is fine.
14 feet.
Yeah, it's a well-defined road.
Yeah.
I would take issue with that from the standpoint that a truck driver, or a fire truck driver, or other kind of truck driver is not gonna guess that there's gravel under grass. They're gonna decide not to drive there. Especially in an emergency services situation. It's gotta be clearly a drivable surface, or they're not gonna drive on it. And it could be in the middle of the night, and there's no lighting there.
So they can round it up.
Street,
I have a small procedural recommendation.
could you speak at your microphone?
I have a small procedural recommendation. Now that I've presented a summary of the case, I would recommend open the public hearing, close it, and then get into discussion.
Any other questions before we move into the public comment section? Okay, seeing none. Anybody in the public wish to step forward and comment about the private road variance? Other things that you may wish to discuss with the board will come later during regular public comment. This is for the private road variances only.
I live at 3676 North Territorial. I just wanted to clarify for John that the road, I don't know if you've driven down the road, but it is well defined at 16 feet. That in the part where the grass is growing in is being killed off, and I routinely drive all the way to the edge of the road just to try and keep the grass down and to get rid of the grass that's on the road. But it is well defined all the way to 16 feet from the front to the back, and the gravel does extend past the 16 feet. I would also add that there are many private or public roads in the state, or in the township, that are not 18 feet wide. So I think to hold a private road to a higher standard than a public road would be a bit much. And I think that there's no issues with a fire truck going up and down my road. They've been down there a couple of times since I've lived there, and they had no trouble turning around or going up and down the road.
A single truck,
Yes.
not two trucks passing each other trying to get water to a fire.
Well, I did have some gravel trains that did pass each other on the road. I did have gravel trains out there when I was working on the driveway. So they did pass each other on the road there. It is plenty wide enough. That's all.
Other comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll close the public participation portion of the public hearing. Board members, any further comments?
To your question, John, the township engineer and DAFD fire reviews are recommending approval of the variances. So they've reviewed the road width.
I didn't read it that way. I read what they said. They didn't explicitly say they recommend approval.
I will, comment. I'm supportive of the variance request to go to 1816 because it way. I do, I guess I would ask that there be some effort of work to ensure that 16 feet of gravel is showing. It may be there, but whatever that requires. I have been there previously as well as this morning, took a photo of my car, and relative to sitting on the gravel, and you cannot pass two cars on open gravel in numerous locations there. So, maybe it's 16 feet, but I don't think so as it currently sits. So I think there should be some work done to ensure, whether it's Roundup or whatever, let's show the gravel at 16 feet.
Any comments on the hammerhead versus cul-de-sac?
Maybe I missed it, but in the application, I don't see any evidence that the property owner where the hammerhead is proposed has explicitly stated that they're willing to have that, to give that easement and have that hammerhead on their property.
That's a good question, John. And I don't know if it's physically constructed yet completely.
There's a pad there. It looks like
I don't know if it's full-on gravel.
Yeah. I was there.
Okay, so I think if the neighbor had some concern with it, whether they signed an easement or not, I would suspect they would have been here tonight to voice that concern or provide something in writing, not opposing it.
Sheree, in our letter from INED, Ted, the engineer, he, on item number 2, the third dot there, a copy of the easement for the hammerhead should be provided. Has Mr. Fritz provided that to you?
Yes, it's on, he provided a drawing that shows the boundaries of the easement, and he also provided the legal description of the easement.
Okay, thank you. So it is in place then?
The proposed easement.
It's it is not in place yet, but he has the paperwork going. One of the requirements would be that he records the easement with the county before a final permit for construction is issued.
That would be recorded by the other property owner, not by Mr. Fritz.
Either one of them can record it, it will have everybody's signatures.
You can
Notarized document.
You can't put an easement on my property unless I say so.
Right. But the document can be recorded by anybody and everybody. I could record the document. You could.
But
It's just got to be a notarized signature.
the easement document will have both the existing property owner's signature, but anybody can record it once he signs it.
Can you explain to me why that hasn't been taken care of in all these 3 months?
I would defer that question to Gary Fritz. Like I explained in my memo, there are many items in the application that are not typically considered complete.
Okay.
But I would defer that question to the applicant.
So at this point in time, if this body were to grant the easement, we would have to clearly state that the driving surface be clearly identified at whatever distance we determine, 16 feet, 18 feet. The easement would have to be filed for the hammerhead versus cul-de-sac, properly reported to the county register of deeds. Is there anything else we need?
My screen first, no problem. So on page 3 of my memo, there is a draft motion. If this body decides to move forward with the approval, it would be the approval of the road permit subject to the 2 variances the applicant has required. And then we would add to those conditions that prior to issuance of either a preliminary zoning compliance permit or a final zoning compliance permit, but there has to be some timeline set to it, the following need to be completed, which would be the road maintenance agreement should be executed and recorded with Washtenaw County Register of Deeds. The road width shall be maintained at 16 feet width, and then that can be subject to fire inspector's review that it's 16 feet through and through. And the third one would be that the easement shall be executed and recorded with the Washtenaw County Register of Deeds. Just like the board did with Potts Drive, once the road board makes their decision regarding the road permit and the variances, I usually work with the applicant, tying the loose ends before I issue the permit for construction.
Any kind of motion?
I move
Yeah.
to, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. I will make a motion to approve the request of the following items: to reduce the minimum width from 18 to 16 feet. The applicant and neighbors living on and using the road shall maintain 16 feet width of visible gravel, as well as maintain overhead clearance of 14 feet to allow for fire access and emergency vehicles. The hammerhead, in lieu of a cul-de-sac, is approved, and that we would need evidence of recording that easement for the hammerhead at the Washington County Register of Deeds.
As well as the road maintenance agreement.
Oh, is that,
Street talked about that too.
The road maintenance agreement and the updated access easement shall be recorded with the county register of deeds.
okay, so I need to add evidence of recording easement for the hammerhead as well as the road maintenance agreement
Executed road maintenance agreement.
at the Register of County Deeds. Okay, Washington County Register of Deeds.
Thank you.
I second.
Further discussion?
I'd just like to point out that 16 feet is more than adequate. I measured Chamberlain Road at several different points. The narrowest and the controlling point had wetlands on each side, and it was 14 feet. And the majority of the road is 16 feet. So it's not 18 feet, and it sure isn't 20 feet. And I was measuring between the berms, and you can't drive on the berms. They're a foot high in a lot of places, so. Fire trucks get up and down that road all the time. So 16 feet is more than adequate. And, I think Mr. Fritz is correct when he points out that many of our public roads don't meet the standard we're trying to hold for people constructing private roads. So 16 feet is fine with me.
Other
As
comments?
Mr. Fritz has indicated, he believes 16 feet of gravel is there, it's just grown over with grass. So there shouldn't be any hardship.
Is that, yeah.
comments?
The International Fire Code calls for 20 feet. The engineer's letter said that the road should be 18 feet. When I was younger, I used to have a tendency to drive too fast, and never did I say to a judge that other people were driving faster than the speed limit as well. Why do I have to be held accountable? It's true, other roads don't meet the standard, but that is, you know, to be cliche, two wrongs don't make a right.
Well,
And I think the International Fire Code is crafted by experts, and it's polished every 2 or 3 years. It's not arbitrary. And I also believe that we should establish equal protection under the law, which means if we grant 16 feet tonight, I think we should always grant 16 feet. And I don't think that's the right path to be on.
well,
Other comments?
Because I believe there are circumstances that can warrant every discussion decision. This one seems reasonable based on it being straight, no significant trees encroaching. And, I agree with you, John, we shouldn't just accept the lowest common denominator because it's out there somewhere. We do have to work to ensure safety as much as we can for community members. And I think this is a reasonable, solution.
well, I would add to that, if we do these road improvements we're talking about, are we gonna upgrade these public roads to the 20-foot standard?
There's money in the bank, or there will be.
Well, I mean, that would be a pretty cost prohibitive thing, and I think people might not like some of their shrubbery obliterated, but,
I would, if you don't mind, I would say that this setting is the easiest place to make it 18 feet, because other driveways are gonna have trees and ditches and things. This one is wide open. There's no physical impediment to making it 18 feet.
Other comments?
We've talked about looking at the road ordinance, and honestly, I don't even think this one should be in front of us. I've mentioned this before, I mentioned it in the last one. This was a lot that was already had a house on it, and we're looking at having a property owner change it to 18 feet or 20 feet. I think that's ridiculous. We shouldn't even be looking at this right now. And I understand what you're saying as far as standards, but the bottom line is when we're looking at changing this ordinance, and we had already talked about it last time, about when it's an existing thing, it can be something that the zoning ordinance officer can approve, because it's already a lot that was built on. I don't even know why we're hearing it, John, personally.
For me, it's public safety.
We don't have a proper scale drawing to know what's beyond the 16 foot. Usually when you would construct a road, you would construct the shoulders out at least 2 feet on each side, out of the same base material. You wouldn't simply stop and fill the shoulders in with clay. Basically, what I'm seeing in the submittals from our 2 consultants that we deal with, the fire marshal and the engineer. The engineer is saying that it should be 18 feet unless approved by the fire department. I would think that in our motion, we would only 16 feet, if the fire marshal approved that. Nobody's excited about that, I see.
Well, we don't have a fire marshal.
The chief is the
Yeah,
fire marshal.
chief.
The chief is the fire marshal.
Yeah. Any further discussion on the original motion? The original motion was to allow the reduction of width from 18 feet to 16 feet of usable gravel road surface. The applicant shall maintain the 16-foot width at all times with a minimum overhead clearance of 14 feet, maintained to allow access for fire and emergency vehicles. The updated maintenance agreement recorded with the county, and the hammerhead easement properly reported with the county recorder of deeds.
And the road maintenance agreement recorded as well. The road maintenance agreement recorded as well.
Yeah.
You said that.
Roll call vote. Shelley?
Aye.
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 No?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Fritz, you have your 2 variances and your marching orders.
Thanks, sir.
Okay. Call to the public. Now is the time for the public to, what?
I thought we had 2 issues on there. One of them was the fees.
Yeah, it was part of the letter. It wasn't part of the application.
Yeah, under the draft motion, it says request to waive fees. This is not part of the road permit request. It's a separate item. Is that something we do now?
If you wish.
I'll move that we waive the fees.
Second.
Okay, further discussion.
On what basis?
It was our error initially.
Any other discussion? Roll call. Arms?
Aye.
Aye.
No?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Okay.
Just a point of clarification, so we have the fees and then we have an escrow that was applied towards engineering review.
There's 2 different things there.
Right,
We just waived the fees only.
okay, thank you.
We incurred the other costs. Mr. Fritz wanted this right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Call to the public. Please step forward, give your name, your address, and tell us within 3 minutes of what you wish to inform the board of.
Connie Savander, 5803 Vaughan Road. I wanted to ask this board to clarify, ironically, easements. Specifically, maybe Sri could talk to it about it at some time, but specifically, it's the distance from the center line of the road, 33 feet, into our properties. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because over the past few months, we've heard a number of residents comment and public participation and public hearings about how they pay taxes on their gross acreage, and so therefore they feel like that they should be able to use all of their property, including that portion in easement. Despite the fact that the ordinance consistently references net acreage, which is, as we know, gross minus the easement. My understanding, the way I think about this, is that, yes, we do pay taxes on our gross acreage, but really what we're doing is we're renting the easement from the road commission, for example. Remember a few years ago when the road commission told all of us that we needed to cut down the vegetation in our easements? And if we didn't, they would come and do that for us by spraying poison. And then there was a time when they cut down a lot of trees in easements, some of them heritage trees. This was all done under the umbrella of safety, which they're allowed to do. But a lot of people didn't really understand how and why they could even do that. I learned about easements when I bought my property, when Branch and I bought our property. And so we knew that whatever we put on our easement, if we put anything there, might not last because the road commission can come and do things to it. So I think it's important to talk about it specifically relative to the animals, because that's where all these comments came from. And help people understand that it's not a good idea to do anything in your easement, why we have it, and even though we do pay taxes on it, it's really part of the road commission's territory. And it seems like easements might be a good topic for a poster board too, along with that poster that people were talking about, the one about the right to farm act that Sri made. And if you need somebody to make the poster boards, I know somebody who would very much like to volunteer to do that. So if you want to know that person's name, just let me know. It's not me, but it's somebody who would do a good job. Thank you.
Other comments from the public?
Hi, Dave Daly, 7223 Mulder. So a couple things. I've talked to some of the trustees already, but we still haven't done anything with the ADA parking spaces. So if it's this board's intention that the minimum legal requirement is fine for disabled and elderly that require help getting out of their cars, and yet we could change all the other parking spaces from 8 feet to 10 feet, I think we're missing the mark. There was over 20 parking spaces filled with disabled license plates at the Webster Town Heritage Festival. So there's plenty of people, and with I guess right now, it's 1 out of every 5 residents is over 60 years old, and it's going up. In my road, it's 3 out of 6, and next year it'll be 4 out of 6 residents are over 60. So anyway, I really think it needs to be addressed. The other is, and I talked about it at the Planning Commission last month, the nuisance ordinance needs to get updated, especially in line with the animals. Our noise requirement in the nuisance ordinance is pretty vague, and it's just going to lead to problems. And then finally, on the roads, I looked it up tonight, Lima Township for private roads, 16-foot road with a 5-foot 6-inch shoulders, 13-foot clear height, and a 50-foot radius turnaround. That's their specification. Just so everybody knows that. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments from the public?
George Goodman, 5144 Farrow Road. I have 2 topics. One is, due to my own technical difficulties, being myself, I'd like to be considered for the road committee. I was unable to submit a email as requested, so that's my own technical difficulties. The second one is pertaining to our residents or citizens here. If we could please, at some point, seriously consider this audio system for those who can't hear. I've mentioned this before, and many people have mentioned it, but I think a new system could go a long way with having people not have to stand up to say, could you speak up? And that new system could be transferred to the new construction whenever that happens. Thank you.
Gary Cook, 6772 Mass Road. Things. Can we have agendas printed so when people come in, I know there's a copy of the whole book there, but can you do like separate ones? So we don't have to look at our phone? And I agree, I mean, Tree's over here sharing a microphone. The other thing is, Coke has been over quite a while. We feel like we're in a different township sitting back here. Can we put the tables back like they used to be and move the chairs up so that maybe you wouldn't even need microphones, people could understand? Secondly, is the township going to change to the zoning ordinance so you need more than 2 acres if you're going to include all your setbacks and wetlands and stuff in this animal ordinance that we're making? I don't know if the wetland thing got left in there or taken out, but when I was reading it before, you couldn't include wetlands in your lot size. And I still don't understand, I pay taxes, I think, to the center of the road, I'm on 2 roads. So if I can't use it, can I have a tax break? I mean, it makes no sense.
You already have it. You do.
The second thing is, in that animal ordinance, they have to have shelter. Okay, if everybody probably knows, I have the Delta Galloways on the corner of Mass and North Territorial. I have shelter for them, but they technically don't need it. Next to a buffalo, they can take the cold, the nasty weather better than any animal. So technically, you know, people that are writing these ordinances, sometimes you need to do a little research. I think all animals should have shelter and food and water, but technically my animals would not need it. They'll lay out in a snowstorm and they'll be covered in snow in the morning. They don't care. I mean, most animals are out in the weather anyhow. And then, lastly, I think you guys are going to approve payments for the parking lot. I ran into Mr. Sharp about a month or so ago. I was kind of wondering why when you come in the main driveway, it drops off so bad, and the water runs across there. When it rains hard, it lays there. It used to come in flat, and he told me that Washtenaw Engineering said that's how it's got to be made, because that was a road commission requirement. Hence, we just did the asphalt here, and it doesn't slope back in. And the fire station was built, what, 3 years ago? Those driveways don't slope. I came here, it was not last Saturday, the weekend before, to do recycling, and I pulled in, and since I've pretty much done concrete work my whole life, I could smell the sealer that they applied. They had the driveway here barricaded off. Everybody, I sat here, backed up, but there were 3 cars that came in and went to the recycle dumpsters that were in front of the fire station doors over here, driving on top of the new curing that they sprayed on the concrete. I mean, it just makes sense if you were going to do that, you would have blocked off both the entrances, because people were coming in here, driving down across the front of the building, going to the recycle dumpsters. Or somebody should at least come and check. So maybe that should be on your punch list when you do the parking lot. But Washtenaw County Road Commission regulations state it only has to pitch back 2% in the 2 foot of the shoulder, and then it can go 10% up or down in the rest of their right of way. And I don't, for the life of me, understand why that concrete got poured like that out there. I personally would hold Washtenaw Engineering liable, have it torn out this spring and redone like it should be. And everybody's going to say, well, it wasn't our tax dollars, it was federal money. But technically, it's our tax dollars because we're all going to pay for this. And they should probably reseal the parking lot. The last thing is, I don't know if you're gonna do snowplow bids, but what are you gonna do about spreading salt on the new concrete? Because salt eats concrete in the first year. Don't ask me why. Been doing concrete 40 years, but it'll do it. The second year, it doesn't eat it as bad. So that might be something to consider. And hopefully, you guys hold some money back or something. I don't understand their reasoning out there at all. It would be a lot easier if that thing was level, so you could have some sight distance going out on the Webster Church Road. Some of the trees, I think, got trimmed that out, but there's a couple oak trees in the way when you look to the north that make it difficult. And I know that was in the bid, so, you know, you got engineering on it, but to me, it didn't get done right. You could have asked me, I would have told you for free. I don't know how much you paid Washington Engineering, but I'm sure it was probably 75 to 80 grand on the whole deal. How much was it?
I don't know. The contract was $34,000.
Okay. Well, I'll get down for 30.
Thank you for your bid. Other comments?
Grant Avenue, 5803 Vaughn Road, on the roads. George did ask me to put his name forward, thinking that I was the point. And I guess I thought I was on the point since I filed all these documents the last 2 months, of which my name was on there. Because I didn't know about the website. It's like a complete ignorance like George. We were steelhead fishing for the last 2 weeks, so maybe it happened during that time period. Put my name on the list. I'm happy to do it. As part of a registered professional engineer in the state of Michigan. And we were part of the team back in 2019. We actually started this effort before COVID squashed it. We were doing it as a special meeting at that point. Typically, there'd be 3 trustees that met with the road commission, typically the road commission office, addressing a bunch of these same questions. But by way of housekeeping, based on some of the comments from last meeting, as far as the number of members, I have 7 here. That was really copied both in Lima and Scioto and Dexter townships. In the case where if there's more board members that are interested, you can simply have it as a special meeting. And you have to issue then the agenda, being roads and only roads for that meeting. And then there's no limit. But that's for the board's consideration. I think the biggest item, is probably the visual, I think, would be the charge for the board. And we've talked about this before. I could envision a wall-sized map of the entire township that eventually gets colored red, yellow, green as far as the quality of the roads. We would have probably get a name charge for the roads committee in conjunction with whatever's been done in the past. And Sharp has sent out a survey that's been done to residents as to what their view of that was. And I'm sure the Washington County Road Commission has done something similar as well. And then the last one, Dan, you commented on F. That paragraph F was really me combining a bunch of paragraphs from the other ordinances that were out there. I certainly am sensitive to the trees comment about, we've been a lightning rod topic in the past about cutting down live trees in the easement. I think the bigger reason for leaving it in there actually came out of a conversation I had with Shar, is that instead of cutting down live trees, as you drive around, there's a ton of dead standing trees that I think actually represent the bigger concern. That was part of my motivation for it being there. But also, and remember, the board has the final check and balance on this. So if anything the committee comes up with, you come up here if you have a concern like that, there would be the opportunity to address it. So with that, I'll thank you for your time.
Other comments?
Good evening, Kurt Easter, 4740 Farrell Road. I just wanted to talk briefly about the care of animals ordinance. I know it's not being, sorry, can you hear me? I know it's not being discussed tonight, but it's something that's important to me, so I wanted to just say a few thoughts I had on my mind. Full disclosure, I do keep animals, and I believe I'm on a conforming parcel also. So. But when we were at the planning commission meeting last time, Mr. Westman had mentioned that there weren't a lot of alternative to the proposal. So I decided to think about that, and I talked to some people, and the more I thought about it, the thing that seemed to be the heart of the matter that people were most concerned about was the size of the acreage that they were allowed to keep animals on or not. And so I was thinking about, well, what is it about the size of the acreage that's so important? And the two things that really seemed to come down to was, number one is that there's a potential nuisance problem with your neighbors, and then two is that it's the care and the welfare of animals. And so those are the two things that, when we think about, why we want the ordinance anyway, we want to think about the reason for the ordinance. Those are really the two that I came up with. So looking at the care and the welfare of animals, that's pretty well the requirements for having care for animals. Well, they're pretty well spelled out by the GAMS and by MDARD, and you can go to MSU Extension and get a lot of information about how to care for animals. The size of your lot is really incidental to most of the recommendations that you're given, right? So again, depending on your management strategy, the area of your land is not as important to do they have good access to water and to waste management, and do they have veterinary care, right? These are the things that are really go to the heart of animal welfare. And so I would suggest that the thing to do in this case would be to defer to these organizations and the recommendations they have. And then going back to the nuisance ordinance, I'm very sensitive to the idea of balancing the rights of the farmer to the rights of the neighbor to enjoy their property. But I would say that agriculture in and of itself is not something that we need to regulate, right? We don't tell people how big they can have their vegetable gardens. And I would actually say that most people probably enjoy when they walk around the township. They like seeing, flocks of sheep, and they like seeing cows grazing, right? It's part of the charm of the township. But it's the things about those animals that people might object to, right? It's the smells of the animals, it's the sounds of the cows bellowing, it's the animals that wander off of the property and get onto someone else's land. So when we, I guess what I'm saying is that it's not the presence of the animal per se that's the problem, it's the potential problems of what that animal can do. When we look at other similar situations, right, people have dogs, but a dog can bark in all hours of the night, and they can defecate on my lawn, and they can bite my kid, and they can chase me when I go running down the road. We still let people have dogs, right? And people can use cars for all kinds of bad things. They can go, they can drag race, and they can, they can go cruise the streets, but we still let people have cars, right? So again, it's the activity that we should be regulating. It's the nuisance activity that we should be focusing on, because that's really what I think people are concerned about. As a final thought, at the last meeting, it was the sense that I got, and nobody said this, so it's just my impression, but that we've been working on the ordinance for a long time, and that it's time to move forward, with something. And I guess from an economic terms, the time and the effort that we have spent, these are sunk costs, meaning that they're spent and they're done with. We can't get them back, but it's a fallacy to say that because we did all this effort, we should therefore go forward with something. Again, just looking at it from an economic perspective. Again, nobody said this to me, this is just the impression that I sort of had. There are people that will disagree with me, but I would agree that the ordinance that's proposed is an improvement over what is currently on the books. I would agree with that. But I think that we can do better. And once this ordinance is passed, it's not as though there's going to be a strong motivation to go back and revisit this issue. So I appreciate your time. I would just encourage you to, as this ordinance comes forward, to just consider the alternatives and try to please present the residents of the township with the best ordinance that we can have. Thank you very much.
Other comments?
Peter Stevens, 7500 Trotters Lane. I
I guess I'll just say I was a little disappointed to see that the complaint was gonna be knocked off with correspondence and not discussed by this board this evening. John and Tony, I spoke with both of you about how I would go about doing this, and I'm just following your instructions here. I did what you basically told me to do, to have it put onto the agenda, so I'm disappointed to see it being taken off. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Other comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the treasurer's report. Mr. Sharp.
Good evening. I would start by drawing your attention to the check register element of the report. I just wanted to highlight the fact that the clerk's office and the treasurer's office are continuing to work to do more and more of our disbursements through electronic means, ACHs and electronic transfers, and less by paper check. The predominant reason for that is to minimize the risk to the township of check fraud. Having said that, there are other kinds of fraud, and we'll be meeting with one of our bankers in the near future to talk about how we can increase the security of electronic payment methods as well. We're currently 50% through the fiscal year. If you exclude the $60,000 transfer from the general fund to the CIP fund, we're 31% through the budgeted general fund expenses. So we're living well within our means relative to the budgeted expenses. 2024 summer tax collection to pay on time was by September 14. We're currently at 97% collected. The municipalities in Washtenaw County all had a similar experience. People waited until the last minute more than usual, but in the end, the collection ended up being pretty typical. Last but not least, we have an agenda item later regarding the millage rates that we'll levy on the infamous L4029. And I would draw your attention to the cash summary by fund report in the treasurer's report, and highlight the fact that the general fund balance continues to be robust, and that from the accountant's point of view, the capital improvement fund, which is also unrestricted, is considered part of the general fund, in essence. We will begin winter tax collection on December 1st. One thing you might want to consider and possibly take action on is whether or not we want to have any kind of a flyer in the December tax bill. If we wish to do that, we should probably make that decision this evening, because by the time we meet again next month, we will have missed the deadline to get that to the printer. Those are my comments. Are there any questions, advice, comments?
I had a question on a check,
Okay.
1,100 to Phoenix Contractors.
You know, it's funny you ask about that one, because that one came back in the mail today. That is the final installment on the construction of the fire station. It is the little bit that we had been withholding pending the punch list.
Was it, well, that's my question, was that punch list completed to satisfaction?
To the chief's satisfaction, yes.
So we did cut a check, and I mailed it out, and it boomeranged back to us. I went to Phoenix's website today, and the address we mailed it to is the address on their website, so I don't know why it came back.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that, that maybe corrections that they needed to do until we made that final opinion. But if the chief is satisfied, then obviously I'm satisfied.
On that point, weren't there some trees that might have needed to be replaced, or, I mean, are we satisfied?
Those were already replaced, were they not?
I don't know.
What we have left, there are some minor warranty issues, and I believe there may have been one item, the drain on the compressor. I guess the fireman turned it off instead of having us get it repaired, so it's out of warranty, therefore has to be repaired. But that's nothing on Phoenix.
I have a question on the report, John. Would it be possible to have, in the cover sheet summary, revenue expenditure report, have the line item pulled up and placed on here instead of it getting, I think it's covered in the other category?
Which
So
line item?
the line item for township tax, 101,000,402.101.
So the way that I construct that summary is I sort it from largest to smallest. And since we don't collect township tax until December, that line item is zero. It's zero all year until the end of the year when we collect winter tax. Essentially zero. I mean, there can be artifacts, but.
Well, this is showing budget numbers. So your summary sheet?
Yeah, so I've sorted that by actual, not by budget, from greatest expenditure to less expenditure. If you want to see all the detail in the Excel spreadsheet that goes out in the email.
I have it. What I'd like to see is, I mean, you have on your federal grants other, which is zero. So I'd like to see the township tax showing up on this report, which is, $394,000.
For a budgeted item, right.
Which,
but there's
of,
no activity.
of our total, which is 1.5 million. Maybe you're not.
Maybe I don't understand what you're referring to.
Okay. The document.
Let me pull it up.
The fourth page of the materials you provided us that are in the packet.
Yeah, on the side.
Titled Revenue and Expenditure Report.
Yes.
So I'm just asking whether the line item for township tax revenue can be shown on this summary report.
The answer is yes. I mean, I can show anything on this. I'm trying to make this summary fit onto one page, and I guess I'm not making myself clear. There is no township tax revenue until December.
I understand that, but it is budgeted.
Right, it is budgeted. And the way that I craft this report currently, I do it based on year-to-date balance, which is actual activity. So by the time we get to the end of December or the end of January, we're going to have activity which will bring that line item up on onto this summary.
Okay, I'm just trying to make it a little more, so we can see it in action.
Yeah, there is no action until December 1st. That's when the tax bills hit the mailbox. So our fiscal year starts April 1st. From April 1st until December 1st, there's zero activity on that line item.
Unless someone pays their taxes early.
You can't pay before December 1st. I can't receive it, even if you try.
Okay, I'm just trying to make it more visible, so.
All right.
Third questions for Mr. Sharp? Comments? Motion?
I'll make the motion to accept the treasurer's report and pay the bills as presented, as well as those anticipated bills received before our next meeting scheduled for November 19th of 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call. Aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Consent agenda reports. Is there any report that we need to pull out of the list of consent agenda? Anybody wants to examine individually?
Move to receive and file the consent agenda report.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, further discussion. Seeing none, those in favor of the consent agenda reports being received and filed, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Old business. Mr. Sharp. L 4029.
Yeah, so in your packet is a draft L 4029. That is the form that officially tells the world what we intend to levy on the real estate tax. Let me pull it up here. The three of them are the same three that have been on our 4029s for years, and then we have the new one, which is the road millage, which the voters passed in August. The way that I constructed this draft, I looked at the robustness of our current general fund and at the size of the road millage levy relative to the size of the operating millage that we're authorized to levy. And I concluded that we don't need to levy anything for general operating. And last month I provided you on the table, it was not in your packet, a little worksheet that I put together for my own review, which basically looked at the average annual increase in our general fund balance over the past 5 years. That average annual increase in our fund balance was about $200,000, which meant, in a sense, we collected a couple $100,000 a year in revenue that we didn't spend, and it went in the bank. We also averaged over the last 6 years road spending of about $227,000. When you add those two numbers together, it's well over $400,000. Long story short, in my opinion, if we do all of our road maintenance out of the road millage, and we forego growing our general fund balance, which I don't believe needs to be grown, we can levy zero on the operating and still be extremely healthy financially speaking. So that's my recommendation.
And this is just for the 1 year, correct?
This is a 1 year levy. Every year we have to go through this exercise. So if we found that this was not sustainable, we could
do something different a year from now.
I would say that, it sounds like a good idea, but how this will be perceived then, a year from now, if we decide that, or the new board decides that operating levy should be reinstalled, it will be considered that, you're raising our taxes, these are new taxes, and they would be right, so I would just caution against this. I don't know if you can have too much money. We could probably find some uses for it.
I have maybe a compromise. And as you recall, I voted no on the roads millage because I wanted us to ensure that we would offset at least, a big part of that increase for the roads. Because we have been covering roads and are pulling money from the operating the general fund. So I guess what I would propose would still be, a reduction in our current millage rates, but to actually transfer money from the general fund to the roads fund and have a minimal operating millage, so it doesn't disappear, and then levy less than what was approved for the roads millage, and then cover the cost of that through transferring money from our general fund to the roads budget. So to accomplish that, and John, you would probably need to run numbers or quick analysis, but if we had an operating levy of 0.1755, that would generate roughly $100,000. And if we then levy on the new roads millage, which we asked for and were approved at 0.8225, if we levy 0.2102, that would generate about $120,000 for the millage, and the balance of that to get to the 470, which the 0.8225 would generate, which requires to transfer $350,000 from the general fund over to roads.
Could you give those numbers again for me, Dan?
Operating at 0.1775 and roads at 0.2102. And then we would also want to transfer, wouldn't have to occur tonight, but transfer money from the general fund, which has a hefty balance, to the new roads line item of roughly $350,000. So that would be for this year, and then next year, another analysis could be done, but I would think that a similar logic could be applied. And that, in essence, would reduce the
same amount of revenue, 470 for the 10-year improvements of the roads.
With the transfer, yes.
Yeah.
But it would reduce the taxes that our community would be paying for
By
the township
the general fund balance.
and the road millage.
This really begs the question then, why did we ask for the road millage to begin with? I thought the whole idea was to fix the roads. And, historically, we have spent up to $400,000 a year out of the general fund. And it's been a drop in the bucket. And I just thought our objective here was to try to make some progress rather than just maybe keeping even. Maybe I'm mistaken there, but we haven't collected the dime of the road millage yet, and you want to roll it back 75%?
months. So it's to draw that down a little bit. And yes, we did go to the community and they were supportive of the millage, which is wonderful. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have to levy the whole sum.
I just think a lot of people have an expectation that they're gonna see some road work. And, we will see.
Yeah, I don't know that we should roll it back. I say that partly because we know, we've seen in the last couple of years, there are actually some capital improvement projects on the roads that need to be done. Over on Walsh Road, for instance, that bridge, they said, is gonna cost $400,000 to $700,000 to repair, if I remember correctly. I mean, stuff like that, this would give us an opportunity to do the work that we're already doing and start doing the stuff for resurfacing and getting the road work done. And then there's a lot of culverts and stuff with road commission, and we've been leveraging that with grants and stuff like that, but I think that this will give us a little bit more opportunity to do that. The perception of what people are gonna see is they wanna see the roads start to be nicer. And it's hard to do that when we're doing a culvert here or a culvert there that's gonna be taking up all the money. And that's, I think we're gonna run into an issue with that until we get some of those main infrastructure things done.
I look forward to the soon-to-be-established committee's input on what projects need to be done first. I was opposed to Mr. Scharf's proposal here, and I argued with him about the perception next year when we have to go back and go back and levy 3/4 of a mil approximately to operate the township. I'm in favor of Mr. Scharf's proposal as written on the L 4029 by not levying the operating millage, living off our fund balance for operating, and collecting the .8225 for the roads. And that would be a 10-year program to improve every gravel road in the township, assuming our inflation rates remain constant with the costs.
I'm just not sure that calculation for that considered those culverts and stuff. I'm pretty certain it did.
We may have to take that out of operation at some point in time. I'm not worried so much about culverts as I am the Walsh Road Bridge.
John A., I'd like to restate what I said in a complicated manner, in a simple manner. What I've proposed, all other things being equal, would result in our fund balance in the general fund growing by $83,740. So my proposal doesn't result in spending down the general fund. It just stops it from growing. It's been growing by more than $200,000 on average a year for the last 5 years.
Well, I think you picked the wrong 5 years though to look at, like our road spending. In 2020, we didn't spend money other than
no, but in 2021, we spent $487,000.
Right.
I mean, I picked 6 years. I picked the last 6 years. I could have picked more or less, but
2020 was an outlier for everything.
yeah, it was. It was.
Board, what do we want to do?
I would move that we accept Mr. Scharf's L 4029 as written and presented
money for doing anything at the park. Last week, the chair challenged the Parks and Rec Committee to look at grants that might be available, and each member was assigned certain grants to look into. Those would probably require matching funds, and I'm thinking that most of those grants are not significant grants. So it'll be done not in 2 phases, but in multiple steps, even though the budget that we...
Well, I think phase 1 of that project was somewhere in the vicinity, it was $400,000 to $500,000, I don't remember what it was. But I think a lot of these grants are 50-50 match. And so if, I think it would be reasonable to commit $250,000 to the program, contingent upon the fact that, you know, it had to be matched. I'm not sure how we would word that, but basically, if we're going to attract those funds, we have to have matching funds to work with. Otherwise, that's one of the first questions on the grant proposal is, do you have funding available to match? And so, yeah.
That's an appropriate statement for next January or February when we're working on the budget.
John, can you just give us a summary if the budget goes as planned, as we have it now, what does that leave us in the general fund at the end of the fiscal year?
We would go from 3.9 million to 4 million.
So we have 4 million in the general fund. So if we collect 0 for our operating expenses in the next year, and there's some kind of budget crisis, or we decide to allocate $150,000, that's acceptable. What is the recommended general fund amount we should have per our auditors?
So we would probably, in my opinion, want to have at least 2 times our annual expenses, which is a couple $1 million.
So 2 million in the general fund we keep, we don't touch, because that's what the auditors tell us we need in case of serious emergency like COVID.
The auditor will give us guidance, but they're not going to tell us.
Right.
We have to decide what our
Right.
investment is.
So that leaves $2 million in the general fund that's been gathering. And that's still enough money to allocate money to parks. I do understand that we might be concerned about the idea that we may have to levy taxes in the future, but I don't think that's a reason for us to not levy them now. You know, to stop levying them if we don't need them. Yes, we may have to levy them in the future to cover our budget, but we don't need them right now.
The argument against doing this is a political argument, not a financial argument. Everybody likes it when you stop it,
Yeah.
but if you have to restart it, it will not be pleasant. People will not like it. But I would argue that we wouldn't do that unless there was a compelling reason to do that.
Right. And people
And
like.
I think there's a misunderstanding. The biggest source of our revenue is from state shared revenue, from state sales tax. And so if for some reason people stopped buying things in Michigan, we would need to reintroduce this levy. But right now we're collecting quite a bit of money from the state of Michigan from sales tax.
So part of what I was suggesting in maintaining a minimal operating taxes so that it doesn't go away completely, it's still on people's minds. And what's on the table in the motion is a net increase in taxes. So just people understand that. What I was proposing would result in a net decrease and pulling some money that we have, budget and dollars to do it, to offset. This is for 1 year, right? We're discussing 1 year's activity. That's why I put that forth.
The primary difference between your proposal and what I put on the table is that your proposal would in fact actually result in a reduction of the general fund balance,
That is correct.
and mine would not. That's the major difference, and the taxes.
Well, the other major difference is that if you collect a portion of the taxes that we originally were going to collect for road maintenance, and we split some of that off and collect them for operating, there's no guarantee they'll be used for road maintenance. That's the other difference.
I think that residents expect to see this levy, since that's what they voted for. I honestly do.
I think the other way is, I like your idea, but I think it's a little bit confusing for transparency's sake, but I think it's clever. I like your idea.
I wouldn't say it's clever, it's just.
I mean, yeah.
I initially thought that the approach that Dan is taking was the way to go. But the more I think about it, I think people seeing a zero number on their tax bill would be more welcome if they're spending the same amount of money or very similar, the same amount of money. Any more discussion? Okay, we have a motion to accept the draft L 4029 as presented. Roll call. Sharp.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
I
No.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next, road committee formation. In last month's packet, you had a draft that was proposed by Mr. Savender that we only looked at briefly. We need to discuss what we wish to see in a road committee. Some options that were covered here. 7 committee members, 6 of whom were township residents, and 1 board member who would act as a liaison between the committee and the township board. And the road commission would be asked to provide an ex officio member, non-voting member, to the road committee so that we have ongoing communication. Basically, we would want to do staggered terms to begin with and keep them staggered so that we have continuity on the road committee.
Do you have a term in mind?
No. I would think that you'd want to have at least a turnover of 2 per year. If we have 6 members of residents. Not that they couldn't be reappointed. So you'd have 3 different cycles of 2.
So a 3-year term, basically.
Yeah. And something we would need to consider is what constitutes a quorum of a committee. Is it the members that are
seat a 7-member body, it would be 7 voting members, wouldn't it?
Yes.
So a quorum would be 4 voting members. If somebody shows up that's not a voting member, they're,
No, I meant the other way around. If you had 4 people show up, then 3 can take action, make a recommendation to this board. It just needs to be clear. It's not that it's a problem one way or the other. We also need to discuss what their role will be in their recommendation.
I think we should, without going into too much detail, we should be clear on what their marching orders are.
Yeah. Dealing with road treatment, construction, road drainage, road and shoulder maintenance, other things like dust control, landscaping, and tree protection or removal, and tree and weed trimming and so on, and snow removal, and signage probably don't belong in their alleyway.
I mean, for me, it's kind of simple. Which 4 miles do you want to work on this year? Which different 4 miles next year? And at the end of the 10 years, all 40 miles are accounted.
I don't think all 4 miles are equal.
No, they're not. They're absolutely not.
I think
It's going to get difficult because we're going to find some years we're going to want to spend more money than we have, and other years maybe we can get 6 miles done if they were simple miles.
I think one of the things I remember reading in the proposal, which I don't have in front of me right now, was that the board would come up with a way of determining what the priorities were. Like, the Washtenaw Road Commission has now, for their prime roads, they use a system to assess what are the priorities and what needs to be repaired more quickly than others. I would hope that our road group would be doing that locally and talking about what it is. Maybe Walsh makes it on the top of the list. It is pretty bad. Those kind of things. They determine a way to assess the quality of the roads and determine what the priorities are each year.
Well, I think we're talking about gravel roads here. If we were talking about paved roads, the county uses a phaser rating system. I think the road committee ought to come up with their own phaser system, or whatever name you want to call it, to distinguish which roads need to be done first and which ones can be deferred maintenance.
Yeah, I agree. And the road commission will be a part of it too, so they can,
Yep.
they can provide guidance and expertise about how they determine which roads of ours they're gonna work on each year. They make a determination of that too, so they can give us some guidance.
I have a dream. I would like us to touch every mile of gravel road. I'm not sure if that dream is achievable, but if a road got beaten and it was worked on twice in the 10-year cycle, some other miles are not going to get worked on at all. And I would like to see every mile get touched somehow.
I think that goes back to the pretty map we have on the wall where it shows, you know. One of the questions I have is, does it make sense to have more than one board member on it? I think when we look at the level of work there is to be done, it's a lot of work. Board members have access to, and have knowledge of some of the people who might be able to help us get the work done quickly. And it also allows for there to be more than one person on the board who really number one, has the expertise that will be, continue to be needed, but also two, you might have two board members who have different perspectives of where they live, and so differing opinions are somewhat helpful when we're trying to make these complicated decisions about roads and a lot of money.
To that end, I would suggest that we consider appointing 5 non-board member citizens, and then wait until next month to appoint anyone who's on the board or running for being on the board, because we'll know at the next meeting who the new board will be. Tonight, we don't know that.
In your packet, there were a number of people that displayed an interest. And tonight, both Mr. Goodman and Mr. Savender also added their names to the pot. I think the first thing we need to do is establish that there is in fact a committee. Then we can worry about who we would be willing to appoint tonight.
I think there's widespread agreement. We want to establish a committee. What do you think we need to do?
Well, I would like to go through the resolution that Mr. Savender included in our packet last month. Oh. Sorry.
While we wait for John and Mr. Savender, do you have a tool, an evaluation tool such that this person was talking about? Do you have that in mind or under development?
I mean, I'm sure Pacer may be technical, I was thinking something more low-tech, something that all residents could understand. One, green would be I can drive the speed limit on the road without worrying about damaging my car. Yellow is I can barely drive the speed limit, or I can't drive the speed limit without driving my car. The red would be I need 4-wheel drive, go down this road. Something along those
You're
lines.
saying red is Chamberlain Road?
Yeah, all right. But something to that effect, we could get feedback as from the engineers at the road commission to see if we could adopt what they've done. But I'm more of a fan of keeping it simple that everybody understands as a resident.
And how do you think you would accumulate input? I mean, everyone, if you hold an open meeting, everyone is going to be down there saying what we see on the tax bills, pay Jennings Road, pay this road, pay that road.
I would see us establishing a database, and I'm not kidding about the big map. I think the road committee members get out, we divvy up the township, and we go out and look at every mile of road. And ideally take pictures where we can, and start talking about, red, green, yellow type of assessment. It can be changed, it's not etched in stone, there could be, feedback from the residents and say, you missed all these bottles over here. This should be clearly red, and hopefully we move on the list.
Okay, but you do have something in mind, again, as far as, like, potholes per mile, or drop-offs, or culverts washing out, or whatever. That's extreme, but.
Yeah, because we have in here, it's $100,000 per mile for a road. So we have 41 miles, that gets it to 4.1 million. We have one bridge that he's talked about in Walsh, we have 11 culverts. My guess is the Washington County Road Commission came up with 4.7 by allocating $100,000 for every mile, and they put another $600,000 in for culverts and the bridge.
I think we should keep in mind, we're not doing this in a vacuum. So road commission is right there, and they every year say, hey, you should work on, or we should work on these roads. They always provide more than we can provide additional funding to help, but, you know, they will have their eyes on it as well.
Their priority is to say that are not the hours for our residents. That's the only thing I'm thinking about. And we're levying a millage, and everyone's going to expect to see some action.
Oh, I think there will be, but I'm just saying that they're
Yeah, yes.
providing data and input to help us.
There should be a lot of action because they levy the millage too.
I know they do, yes. that-
But their millage
Their
has
millage
nothing
is
to
for
do
very
with what
specific,
we are.
yeah, and it's for very specific projects.
We've got 2 projects in the 4 years, and they're both on paved roads. Okay, if you look at this document, I've made one change based on kind of John and my conversation just now. There will be 3-year terms instead of 4, and they will be staggered to begin with. I think the rest of it's fine. If we get over to F,
John, were you going to change membership from 5 and 2 to 5 and 2?
we could if that was what was desired.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay? Okay. On second page, F, committee members shall be compensated at rate comparable to similar committees convened by the township board. That's a little bit tricky.
F?
F. Parks and Rec do not get paid anything. Compensation Commission by law can't be paid anything. Planning Commission is a commission, not a committee. They get paid. The Election Board does not get paid.
I don't think any committee gets paid.
Yeah. TDR doesn't get paid.
Only CBA,
That's a board.
fire board, and the planning commission, those are the only 3.
Yeah, CBA, planning, are the only ones, and they are committees as such. Meetings shall set their own meeting dates and time, minimum of 6 meetings per year. Obviously, what's going to happen, to begin with, this committee is going to meet more than 6 times a year, just because of the workload. After that, probably in the 3rd or 4th year, 6 may be quite a bit for that to meet. I would think that the initial meeting should be established by the committee themselves after the first meeting, and then at our annual meeting, we should have a specific date for those mandatory 6 meetings if we decide on 6 meetings. Obviously, they have to follow the Open Meetings Act, and we'll probably have to review that with some new members. And D, we just mentioned a few minutes ago, we need to establish, if there's 7 people on the committee, do 4 constitute a quorum, and then they can pass a recommendation on, or does it take 4 to pass a recommendation? basically, the committee is a recommending body to the township board. I think that's pretty clear in here. I don't like the wording of the, under expenditures, the second sentence. Every expenditure needs to be approved by the township board, not just up to the limit of the budget.
I think that first comma could be a period and the rest of it could go away. We have a budget for Parks and Rec, but they don't spend money we spend.
Yeah, I agree with your getting rid of the rest of that paragraph.
Isn't that paragraph just stating that the chairperson gets the last approval before it's presented to this board for payment? That's how I read that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the second paragraph's fine, but the first sentence, the committee shall have no authority to obligate or expend funds. They'll know what their budget is, but
Expenditures.
I would certainly change the priority line in terms of charge A, 1 through 4. I think the major priority would be unpaved roads.
I would even entertain the notion of eliminating paved roads. There's like 1.2 miles of paved local roads, and the millage is specifically for local roads.
Well, I think it should still be in there, but it should be number 4.
Okay.
Do we need to do 3, 5, and 10-year improvement plans?
Do we want to have anything in there as far as forestry? There was a comment made earlier today about cutting down dead trees.
We do 3, 5, and 10-year improvement plans, or
I think we need 1 10-year improvement plan.
yeah, I think that they,
Or a 1-year improvement plan and a 9-year improvement plan to follow.
Can you tell me what, oh, I'm sorry, there it is, I was looking all over, okay. I think 3, 5, and 10 year is good because you have to reevaluate it at 3 years in case there's been some dramatic change on a road or something has happened. You might change the priority of some of the roads and move them around. It's very possible in 3 years, a road that was put on the 9-year plan is in terrible shape.
It's going to come to year 4 or whatever.
Yeah.
I would, in 7D, I would end the sentence at a funding level consistent with roads, village, period. And not put the dollar amount in, because this document's gonna last for more than a couple of years, hopefully.
I agree.
I think the rest of it's great. And I would change, at a March board meeting. Just because it may not be the regular board meeting, that sort of infers it would be. I would actually, under F, delete 4 through 9.
I would be inclined to keep tree protection or removal.
Okay.
I'd also be inclined to keep the tree and be trimming. That could definitely be part of the project.
Okay.
I mean, to this point, if WCRC is, they're the ones who are gonna manage the work, if they have recommendations about any of these things, we're not gonna the board is gonna bring them to the attention, or the, road committee is gonna bring them to our attention.
I don't think that the road committee will have a whole lot of input in these other areas, though. I think this would be their checklist,
Yeah, we're gonna do dust control.
what we're looking at for each individual road.
I don't know that we want to get involved with the tree business along the roads. That can get to be a very, very expensive proposition very quickly. There are thousands of dead trees. How do you decide which tree is the bigger hazard? And if you don't choose one and it comes down on somebody driving by, then the question is going to be, why didn't you cut that one instead of this one over here? And I think this is a road village, not a tree village.
But are we ultimately relying on the road commission to make that decision and do that work? We're not deciding
Well, no.
that.
They'll just tell you to cut 'em off.
We make the decision, they make the recommendations. We're spending this money.
No, but I mean, they're actually doing the work, is what I mean. We're not
Right.
doing that work. So they're the ones who are gonna make the recommendations when they're doing the work about what trees aren't safe in their way, right? Not us.
The guy in the crew is gonna decide.
Yeah, that's what I mean,
Yeah, but
right?
you're also looking at like dead trees, so if we have road drainage control in here and we have ditching, you're gonna have tree removal. It's gonna be part of it. If you need to keep, you gotta keep the canopy off a lot of the roads so they can actually evaporate the water or get rid of the water. This is all part of making the roads better. So, I mean, it's all part of the project. Landscaping, not so much, but those other things, yeah, I mean, do you wanna go down and decide which trees you're gonna take? If it's not part of a project, no. But if it's something that you gotta do for ditching, you absolutely have to do it.
If you're proposing that we remove all trees that create a canopy over the road so that it allows for better evaporation, now you're talking multi-millions of dollars. And you're gonna have some really, really unhappy residents mean, that is a very aggressive approach. And part of the attractiveness of our back roads is the fact that they do have that canopy. And, you start a wholesale tree removal project like that. This is where we got into trouble with the road commission a few years ago. They got a grant, and they just decided they were gonna go out and cut all these trees down, and we had more people than this in here raising hell, wanting us to do something about it. We couldn't. The grant had already been received and the contract let, and they just went ahead and did it. But that was on a small scale compared to what you're talking about. And this would be many, many millions of dollars to accomplish that.
Right, but they're already doing it. You know
No,
that,
they
right?
aren't.
I mean, they've been doing it. They came down Jennings, they cleared a bunch of the canopy.
Yeah,
They
wanted
They
to
went
do-
down Farrell and did it.
They wanted to do a whole lot more on Jennings Road, and we resisted.
I'm not saying we're the
The
ones.
residents, the people who lived along the road, did not want those trees.
I'm not saying we're the ones promoting it, but if these people are liaisons to the road commission, they're gonna be talking to them about it. That's all.
I just don't agree. I think if it's part of a road project,
Right.
if the ditching requires the removal of trees, that's one thing. But I just think it's a slippery slope and really, really expensive. And, man, you'll have every property owner in here wanting to get trees cut because then they won't have to pay for it.
Yeah, that's another one.
This is
Yeah, I
this is
would,
a bad idea.
I concur with John. I would, as I mentioned last time we reviewed this, I think this is an item that we should let Washington County Road Commission be responsible for. So that this committee isn't, don't have people, bothering them because a particular tree was removed or wasn't removed. I just think it's looking at the headache. As to the landscaping item, I think the reference for there is to, maybe seed and mulch when ditches are excavated, not necessarily planting shrubbery. So I don't know if that could be further defined to identify that. And maybe we say for tree protection or removal, per Washington County Road Commission or performed by Washington County Road Commission.
As required for project completion, something to that effect.
Well, they're just making recommendations. Areas of best practice.
Yep.
Okay, do we need to butcher this in, work on this any further?
Can I go back to item 6? I'm confused. If the first sentence is the committee shall have no authority to obligate or expend funds, then why, the second paragraph doesn't make sense to me. That the funds approved by the township board must be voted upon by the committee and certified by the chair. That seems backwards.
I don't need anything after the period, personally.
But that's what I heard, but then I thought the second paragraph was remaining. If that's not the case, then I support that.
Are we deleting second paragraph completely?
I would.
Okay, that was easy. Thank you.
Real quick, before we vote on it, do we want to just open it back up to Brent and see if there's any comment he had on any of our discussion? Yeah, is that okay?
Be quick. On the expenditure item, some of the prior documents of this nature from the other neighboring townships have hired subject matter experts So it was approved at the board level, and the committee has authority to hire the expert and expend the funds. It's kind of what this language is targeted at. But what you were just talking about, John, the board of trustees could handle that, and then, that expert could just report out in parallel or work in conjunction with the committee. And that may be cleaner, keep the financial aspects all with the board of trustees. But that's all that was targeting. The trees, this is all meant as a catch-all for best practice. We brought all this up before. It's not meant to be a lightning rod. I would think that you could envision a case, you talk to the neighbors, you talk to everybody else in the street, and maybe something we want to use our budget to get that new road, as opposed to going down the road and taking every dead tree down without talking to anybody. And that's where the road commission got in trouble before. They just went around and started spraying and chopping without talking to the board.
It wasn't the dead trees that were the problem.
Well, the point, yeah, fair enough, but you could see the discussion here about the dead trees. And finally, all the discussion getting wrapped around the actual budget here a little bit. The 3 and 5 and 10-year plan would help inform that discussion. Because right now, we're assuming that 470,000 gets it all done per year. We haven't talked to anybody else about that number yet. I think it's the first job of folks in this building is to get their arms around, does 470 really get us there? Or should we go into the general funds to deal with culverts or bridges or something else? The one option you may have, is you could get ahead of it and get ahead of schedule, and then possibly start pulling money out after that. So that was the one I wanted to comment. Thank you.
Okay, what do we wish to do with this fine document that we scribbled up?
I move that we adopt resolution, tell me what the number is, Tony.
We were discussing that, 24, 1624.
As amended. A resolution to create a local roads committee.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? Seeing none, it's a resolution. I think we're back to Shelley. Resolution to create a local roads committee.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Frank, could you give me a Word document and I can do our edits on it?
You bet.
Okay, next, we talked about establishing the road committee with 5 residents, and we have a list of people in our packet. I had a little lengthier list that I was going to suggest, but do we wish to
What is the advantage of appointing anyone tonight versus doing all of them?
well, it'd be a lot simpler if we did them all a month from now, because,
That's where I was kind of going.
yeah, there are a couple people that might be on this list that may change positions
Right.
based on the election. Do you wish to defer that until next month?
I do.
Works for me. I'm good with that.
Okay, we'll defer it until next month. Next.
intense discussion before this. And moving on to this, and I also acknowledge that you have other items on the list. Would you like me to set up there, or would you want to go over the backup?
Well, if you sit there, you need to use the microphone.
Yes, either way, I will use my microphone.
Well, that's a good idea. Do you prefer to see the changes on the screen, or are you happy with it just being a discussion with the changes? Why don't you come up and you can't make a decision on that. My understanding, we're starting at section 8, is that correct?
Yes, but I did make some changes based on discussion, or updates, not changes, based on a discussion from the last meeting. While I set this up, I'll give it to you how you want to address the changes prior to section 1 to 8, if you just wanted to go over them and say if that reflects the discussion, or if you want to jump straight to section 8.
I support jumping straight to section 8.
I do too.
We will come back to I would like the board to come back to section 5 after we're done with the rest of the document. Because there are some items with regards to permit applicability. I was going over the notes and the minutes. There's a slight disconnect. I just wanted some clarity on that one.
Okay, we're on section 8 then.
This is loading. I think it's a very interesting coincidence that section 8 deals with variances, which you guys have addressed earlier in the meeting. The change that's being proposed with this draft, then the current ordinance is where there's some emphasis on standards of approval of variances. The current ordinance provides a very general reference to hardships and other factors. This one expands on that a little bit to give you some more context and backup when you review such requests in the future, which is subsection D under 8. A, B, C, and E are revised and simplified versions of existing language. While I set this up, any comments on the intent? ready to go at the beginning of the meeting.
Could we do a fireworks permit while we're waiting?
Yes, please.
Skip, would you like to tell us what you intend to burn, I mean...
We're not shooting bowling balls this year, because I know that came up last year. Thank you for seeing me tonight, you guys. Most of you know me as Skip. My name is Michael Hackbar. We would like to have a fireworks display, backyard consumer products, at 4785 Gregory Road. If permitted, it would be on December 15th at 7:30 p.m. It'd be Sunday. Time is always kept to 10 minutes, just to make sure it doesn't cause too many major problems with neighbors. We do, about 2 weeks ahead of time, go out on Facebook, Friends of Dexter, Friends of Webster Township, let everybody know, then I follow up with a reminder, usually the day before and the day of, because some people actually like to see it from their window. I think Mr. Sharp has a pretty good view.
I do.
We'll always contact the Dexter Area Fire Department and Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department as well, for two reasons. Number one, if they get nuisance calls, they can inform people that it's a short show and will be over soon. And then also to let them know that you never know, just in case. I mean, we're pretty safe. We do everything electronically. It's out in the middle of the field, but we want to have them prepared just in case something happens. We do have plenty of fire extinguishers and hoses at the ready. And like I said, we're out in the middle of the field. I think last time there was a question as to, closest neighbor. It's approximately 381 feet, the closest neighbor. In the fireworks we're shooting, we have a fallout zone of 150 according to NFPA. We go 200 feet, just to be safe. So try to keep it as safe enough as possible.
Did you get any complaints last year?
Everything that I've seen on Facebook has been positive. Even the people that have animals have been thankful for us reaching out well in advance and letting know. There's a couple of people that have horse farms and farms in the area. I actually have their numbers, the people that have asked, and I let them know usually well in advance, and then the day of, I'll text them in the morning, let them know whenever, when I get out there and start set up. Just a reminder for next night. And so far, so good. Actually, I was just going through that while I was sitting over there.
Real quick. In years past, you've provided a map layout. Is that the same? Is it the same as you to you before?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know why I didn't get on the packet, I thought I sent it in the email, but it is the same, and I can send it back out if you like.
I don't need it, I just confirming it's the same.
Yep, it's the same.
Any other questions, board members?
I would move that we approve the permit.
Second.
What permit is that?
The fireworks permit for December 15th.
7/13.
For 4785 Gregory Road.
Yes.
And second? Okay. Any further discussion? Permit, I don't know where we left off on a roll call. Harms?
Aye.
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 Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Did you break something?
I don't know. Those should let me know next tomorrow.
Okay,
I'm gonna go back.
let's go through the paper version, we all have it in front of us. I believe. Anything you need?
Nothing changed from section 8 on since last month, did it?
No.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
While Sri was messing around, did everyone have a chance to read section 8? Are there any changes to it? I thought it was good.
I don't
So,
have
we're trying
any
to move it along.
recommendations for any changes.
Okay.
I'm not sure what an unnecessary hardship is.
Probably leave out the word unnecessary.
I'm not sure how that helps, that word, so I could lose it.
I think in terms of ZBA variances, unnecessary hardships have to do with something that is not financial and something that is not self-creative and out of their hands.
Yeah, but specifically the word unnecessary. Either a hardship or it isn't.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's an A and B.
Oh, and in D.
Are we, as a board, recommending replace that with a different?
Just take away unnecessary, just keep hardship.
Any kind of hardship? Okay.
Shelley, did you say 8's okay with you?
Mhm.
Okay.
Except for things that are unnecessary.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
So does that bring us to section 9?
Yes.
Okay.
Section 9 is a much simplified version of the current permit application requirements. That list has been prepared based on the applications we have reviewed in the past, in the last 1 year, and that was put together with the help of our engineer as well.
I had a problem tonight with D. I found it somewhat difficult to do some decision-making with the what this says.
I mean, I can't just sketch it with my pencil. I know.
That's how it comes out.
I know.
I think the intent of having that flexibility here is to, if there are existing driveways that are seeking upgrade, there might be some exceptions provided if the engineer feels like, based on the information available on Washtenaw County and existing surveys, if he's able to make a professional determination, and his site visit, if he's able to make a professional determination, then the cost that would incur getting a professional person can be waived.
On 9, it talks about a completed application form. Should we have the form?
We have an application that was part of the packet. That was updated based on the current ordinance. That will be again revised once this ordinance is adopted.
How is the escrow amount determined?
Right now, we only have escrow amount that's being applied to the engineer's reviews. And at a minimum, he does one review for each application and one site inspection prior to his review. And there might be 2 or 3 site inspections during construction, and a virtual pre-construction meeting. So based on all this, for a minor private road, it's up to $600. And then for a larger road, we're starting off with $1,000. But we haven't used all the amount so far. So we're ranging between $400 to $800.
And how much time do you spend on one of these?
Quite a bit. That might be mostly because the existing ordinance is very complicated. So I spent hours and hours in multiple meetings trying to explain that to the residents and trying to coordinate the reviews and site visits with the engineer and the fire marshal. But my hope is once this is in place, we've already have a system that's working well internally between fire and fire marshal and the engineer. I'm hoping my time would be cut back. But I would still, I'm the one who receives all the applications and processes, puts the packet together. So I would assume I would at least spend 3 to 4 hours. Depending on how good the application is. If it's incomplete, I generally don't transfer anything to Ted unless I determine the application is complete.
In 9C, in the second line, it says shared drive, and it also says driveway. And I keep coming back to this, but this is a private road ordinance, not a driveway.
Yes, but the terms are used in the right context. This one says a shared driveway confirming the consent of additional driveway approaches. So what we're talking about is how many houses are connecting to that shared drive. Driveway only serves one house. Shared drive serves up to 3. Private road serves more than 3. That's the hierarchy of terminology we've applied in this ordinance.
And do do we have sample letter language, or do we expect the applicant to come up with their own language?
For the letter of authorization?
Yes.
Oh, there is a form. The form just requires information to be filled in with like the property address, all the property addresses, their names, and then a sign, a place for signatures. It's pretty standard.
And just for reference, this item is potentially, if a neighbor doesn't want whatever to occur, you don't sign this, theoretically this permit wouldn't be processed. I just think people should know that, or at least that's my understanding of this.
That is good. If it's a newer road, then it's usually the developer or a representative who applies for the permit, but the letter of authorization, getting signatures from all existing owners, that would mostly apply for existing roads, existing non-conforming private roads.
On 9G1, at the beginning of the parens at the end of that sentence, I would suggest that we add or a greater distance before as.
Greater distance if required by the engineer?
Well, my suggestion was only to add or a greater distance as may be necessary. It's our,
Would that, then would it be, instead of just right before as may be necessary, what if we add or additional information? Oh no, we already have that down. I'm just trying to find what's the appropriate place to put that. So existing topographic contours within 50 feet or more from edge of roadway as necessary.
well, I'd like the explanation to determine whether drainage methods will be adequate.
Oh.
So there is a purpose there. I was only trying to indicate what may be necessary. So a greater distance may be necessary.
Okay. So then, to clarify again, I'm reading the last part of the sentence. And existing topographic contours within 50 feet from edge of roadway or greater distance as may be necessary to determine whether drainage methods will be adequate?
Correct.
Okay. Under K, I was corrected by the Washtenaw County Road Commission on the second line where it says permit or a waiver. They clarified that they only issue permits, no waivers. The permit itself will say if they don't require one, it is still called a permit, but they'll just say you don't need one.
I also wonder, for the title of that item,
so. They do make a reference to driveway, but I agree, with our terms we've used across the ordinance, that might be confusing. From the title, we can remove it because we do have, but we leave it in the language because that's the term they use.
Should we replace the word driveway with approach? I'm asking.
I think,
In both cases, whether it's a driveway or a private road, they refer to it as an approach.
right, okay, yeah, it wouldn't hurt.
Does the county have a drain commission?
Yes,
It does?
it does.
It's water
Water
resources.
resources.
Oh. They have a drain system, yes. That's a trick question. Just to summarize, these standards are much simpler and straightforward and succinct than the existing ordinance standards, with an option where the engineer can reduce the extent or the detail of certain standards.
So if we use this table in the application that we were considering tonight,
The table, or are we moving on to section 10?
oh, I'm sorry. Forgive me, I didn't realize I was jumping ahead.
Are we good with section 9?
I have one more item. In J, the draft easement exhibit, I think we should itemize the easement boundary lines need to be shown. We call out providing legal description, but it doesn't specifically call for the easement boundary lines to be shown.
Yes. That is my pet peeve. Because most of the easements recorded just refer to a legal description because the county doesn't require the lines and it's always confusing.
A picture is worth 1,000 words.
Yes.
Well, everything within that, prior to the legal description would be shown on a drawing.
Mhm. Moving on to section 10. Most of the standards, I'm sorry, there's a small error in numbering. The dimension standard should be capital A, and then the design standard should be capital B, and so forth. Under dimensional standards, the big difference is that the private road serving more than 3 lots, it's been increased from 18 feet to 20 feet. The current ordinance refers to 18. The fire marshal's recommendation is to move that to 20 feet to be consistent with the fire code for roads that serve more lots. The access easement width is the 66 feet minimum. The current, and the 40 feet may be permitted per section 11, that is consistent with the current ordinance, no changes there. The shoulder width, no changes there. The shoulder width for the private road was increased to 4 feet from from the current ordinance.
And that's where I was going with my question. In our discussion for the public hearing this evening, there was only slight mention to shoulder. We were talking about 16 feet of driving surface and literally no shoulder.
It was not, I'm sorry.
So our requirement, if we adopt this as it's written, would be at least 2 feet of shoulder on each side of
Right.
anything.
The current ordinance also requires 2 feet of shoulder, so, but for the application that was reviewed earlier today, both fire and the engineer indicated that there is enough shoulder existing. So that's why it wasn't pointed out as something missing or requiring a variance.
Well, it must be imaginary then, or I just need new glasses.
I would defer that to both of them. They are the ones who completed the inspection. And then the turnaround and cul-de-sac requirement, item 4, that's a new one. That would just requires a turnaround or a cul-de-sac only if the roads exceed 150 feet in length, and that is consistent with fire code as well. The current ordinance requires a cul-de-sac or a turnaround irrespective of the length, so this will give some relief if the roads are shorter. A cul-de-sac or a turnaround is not required.
So how do you fit a 40-foot radius in a 66-foot width?
That's the radius at the end.
Yeah.
66 feet is the access easement, so obviously
You need
the
more
easement,
space.
right, the easement around the cul-de-sac will be more. The hammerhead is a new standard. The current ordinance requires a variance to allow hammerhead. The new draft makes it as an option, administrative option to allow hammerheads.
Can that be spelled out easily, or, I mean, a reference to a fire code, it might be easier for you to access, but for an applicant, they're not going to have a copy of the fire code necessarily.
Right, so at the end,
Is it possible to fit the dimensions in that box or not?
there are multiple options for the fire code. So on page 12, I will make a reference to that page here. The 103.1 on page 12 is an excerpt from the fire code that regulates different options for hammerheads.
I don't believe we've adapted the fire code, the international fire code.
We did not.
We have not.
We have not.
Why are we using it as a standard?
It's a
Because we
reference.
desire to use the hammerhead. And our current ordinance does not
Because
allow.
Going back to the width, a shared drive 18 feet, when I measured Chamberlain Road, it's a public road that's only 16 feet.
We gotta
And
get
we're
that.
talking about a driveway here with 3 houses, not a public road. I just don't agree with
I think we ought to bring Chamberlain Road up to our private road standards.
that. You can start tomorrow.
Too many trees.
Yeah, that's the first thing, you'd have to get rid of all of the trees.
So we need 14-foot clearance.
Probably have that. Pretty close.
If I may address that question, we are using fire code standards because they are researched and are endorsed by, applied by most fire departments everywhere. However, with this ordinance, we do have an option that would grant variances that would allow a reduction from that width, which is at board's discretion.
Sri, on item 5 of the dimensional standards, turning circle radius, is that related to the turnaround of the cul-de-sac?
Yes. It's the radius. If it's a hammerhead, I could replace the turning circle to cul-de-sac, just so we are using the same.
And the image on page 12 for the cul-de-sac is not, this is a minimum, 40-foot minimum, correct?
Right.
So maybe we should say that,
Yes.
because the image shows dimension that's greater than 40 for what would be the,
I think that's a good point. I'm going to remove that image from that exhibit because that image was essentially in reference to the hammerheads. That's a good catch. That can be confusing because that also refers to a 26 feet wide road. I'll leave the other 4, but I'll remove the other cul-de-sac one. Okay, and the overhead clearance, the 14 feet minimum, that's a new standard. And the rest, 8 through 11, 8 to 10 are existing, no change there. 11, we had multiple speed limits in the current ordinance that resulted in multiple tables. We don't have any private roads that exceed 20 or 25. So that's brought down to just 1. And as you can see, this table is a compilation of 6 or 7 tables in the current ordinance. So it's all in one place. Any questions or comments for item A, dimensional standards? Okay, if we have none, moving on to B. Design standards for shared drives and private roads. All those are existing, they're just compiled in one table. The only difference is the first sentence that says the township engineer may permit minor variations to material specifications for the roadbed. That was put in there because there are certain variations to sub-base and base the applicants have proposed, which are consistent. It's almost like replacing the species in a landscape plan. The gated entry is, there is a reference to gated entry in the current ordinance, but it just talks about many other standards that refer to landscaping and location, which are probably not as appropriate as the actual width of the gate. So those standards are eliminated and the focus is just placed on the gate and the divided roadway and the Knox box. Any questions or comments, revisions to B, design standards?
did you say B?
Right, because I said, before I started, dimensional standards should be A and B.
Sorry, I missed that, okay.
Okay, signs is, it's kind of very implied in the current ordinance. This one was just put under its own section. This one just gives a a heads up that you may require signs. In the sense, most people, if the road is named, a new name is given to a road, then one would need a road sign. And if one is proposing a hammerhead or additional width or proposing any restrictions of no parking, there might be no parking signs required. And the reference to the manual on uniform traffic control devices is only made to determine the size of the sign, so that we don't end up having large signs. C, D, and E, the concrete pavement standards, approach to public roads, private roads within a development, they're more informational requirements, indicating that if it's a public road, then it's not part of this ordinance, you need to work with the Washtenaw County. If it's a private road within a development, such as site condominium, planned unit development, then those are reviewed by the Planning Commission as part of a site plan.
That would be D and E, but what about C?
C is concrete pavement standards. Because we don't see many of concrete paved private roads in the township, the engineer made a reference to refer to the WCRC standards in their handbook, so that we're not recreating standards for roads which are highly unlikely.
And in item 2, the pavement widths are back-to-back of curb, correct?
Right.
Well, and I was wondering, why would we require a curb?
If it's a concrete pavement, the WCRC standards requires curbs for drainage and stormwater flow.
That's kind of assuming that there's a sewer system, isn't it?
The water curbs may be required even if they're connected to drains.
You could have a curb that just outlets at some point in the riprap, wherever it's going.
It directs water to that riprap outlet.
Or it could, be a catch basin that goes somewhere nearby.
Or it could control the water on a slope.
Yeah, I don't want to have a barrier to curbs. If curbs make sense, what curbs should be used, but should they be mandated?
Well, maybe the way to solve it is if we're indicating that any concrete pavements shall comply with Washtenaw County Road Commission standards, maybe we extend that to all, I have to look at it to see whether all the designs address curb and gutter.
I understand from my friend over here that curbs are expensive.
They are very expensive.
And I wouldn't want to pay for one if I don't need it, if there's no benefit. I'm asking questions, I'm not trying to...
I think because they're not, I'm not the engineer, but I think I'm recommending maybe remove 2, 3, and 4, and then indicate concrete pavement shall comply with WCRC standards unless otherwise permitted by the township engineer or the township board. That way we can look at them case to case if one ever proposes a concrete pavement.
Isn't the concrete pavements, is that dealing with the
Composition?
material and?
Yeah,
Well, they're both. So asphalt and concrete are both, it's asphalt and concrete, and cementitious concrete. That's the difference between the two. They're both concrete. Pretty much what they're saying is, if it's hard surface, they want to direct the water so it doesn't, the sheet runoff doesn't erode, because the velocities on hard surfaces go.
but we're not requiring
that's confusing,
Yeah, I know.
because we have a cross-section for
But the
page
bottom,
A.
the bottom line is just saying that it should follow their standards, because they may have exceptions.
Right. And remove 2, 3, and 4.
Yes.
So do the standards indicate when curb and gutter is
They should
necessary?
have that, yeah.
They have concrete standards with curbs and without curbs.
And both.
Maybe we should indicate concrete pavements and design shall comply.
Design standards for concrete pavements. The cross sections on page 12 are prepared by our engineer to cater to the standards in the table. They are consistent.
Do we have, there's reference item A under the title for dimensions for shared road.
The geometric design of highways and streets. Oh, this one's a shared road, it should be shared drive. It's the language under the title for the cross sections. Is that what you're?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, it's a good catch. I didn't miss that.
What are you looking at?
On the image, on page 12, where you have the cross sections, the typical HMA pavement cross section, right under the title, there is the term's not consistent with how we used it. It's a shared road and a private road. It should be shared drive and a private road. And the reason why we put this together, often residents, when they do lot splits and come up with road applications, their surveyor provides a drawing for the road and the easement, but they often miss out on giving us a road cross-section and have complained that it's costing them more to do that. So we wanted to create a cross-section that's in the ordinance, they can just copy and paste.
So it's shared drive and private road?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You got it.
Mm-hmm. Both places.
On the cul-de-sac image,
Mm-hmm. I was going to remove that.
the entire image,
Yeah,
so no reference to the sketches of hammerheads.
right. No, just the cul-de-sac part. I'm going to keep the other 4.
Okay, so my comment was related to the title of that.
Oh, okay.
At the end, call it International Fire Code.
Oh, yes. And I would also probably change the title right above the image, so I'll call it the typical hammerhead design. Okay, we're ready to move on to section 11.
Are we naming all of the images? I mean,
I think it makes
Yeah.
sense to name them and number them.
so we have figure D, but the cross-section doesn't have a reference, does it?
I will update the images with the title and then give and number them and then add a reference to that number in the table.
Thank you.
Last month, the cross-section of the page by itself.
I know, I'm looking at them side by side because I was trying to follow last month's and it's different.
The only difference is I tried to squeeze in the hammerhead.
Why do you want to remove the cul-de-sac diameter?
If every standard in there refers to the International Fire Code cul-de-sac and way higher than our standards.
Okay. Well, it's, yeah, 16 more feet, it looks like.
Section 11 has language that's in the current ordinance in 3 different places. I just put them all together. No new restrictive standards are added. It's exactly how it was before. The minimum easement required is 66 feet. A smaller width of 40 feet may be permitted, provided those